Some people believe that there have been UFO crashes and that technologies from UFOs have already been incorporated into our society. There is a very interesting question about why UFOs seem to appear very often over nuclear facilities, whether that's nuclear power stations, nuclear missile complexes, or even over the oceans in areas where nuclear submarines are operating. Now, there are two theories about this. Hello, I'm Nick Pope, and I am very happy to be on the show today. We have lots of interesting things to discuss. I investigated UFOs for the British government, and this is a subject that is obviously of interest to a lot of people all around the world at the moment. So I'm sure we're going to have an interesting conversation. I don't know whether major global events have in any way been caused by extraterrestrial manipulation or influenced by them, or whether terrestrial groups who are aware of this have in some way manipulated our history and tried to control the way that we behave on this. But to some extent, it makes sense. And throughout human history, of course, elites have governed us. I mean, almost every society in human history has had, if it's a tribal society, a chief. If it's a feudal society, they've had kings and queens. Even in democratic societies, we still have presidents and prime ministers. And although these figures are elected, there's no getting away from the fact that a small group of powerful individuals exert disproportionate authority and control over the rest of us through a mixture of power and money. I mean, you could maybe that's always the way that human society has been. Maybe it's the way that we will always be. You could look at the animal kingdom and you could say that in every pack of wolves, for example, there is an alpha male and an alpha female. So, so maybe this is part of the human experience. But I don't rule out the possibility that if we've been visited, if these higher minded, more advanced entities have been watching our development and maybe even playing a part in that development, that yes, there is a degree of control here. I mean, imagine the way in which human beings, for example, biologists might have an ant farm. And now ants have a very advanced civilization in some sense, lots of different types of ants with different roles. But when human scientists are studying them, we sit above that and sometimes we control the experiment. So who is to say that somebody else isn't controlling our experiment, our human history? Many people, for example, believe that reality, the universe, is just a simulation, that we have been created, that everything we see and experience and feel or believe we feel is just a construct of a higher intelligence that has made the universe, the reality in which we live. These things, we can't necessarily ever prove them or disprove them, but they're interesting philosophical thought experiments. We don't know the truth about extraterrestrial visitation. We don't really even have a smoking gun that would prove this in a definitive way. And just as when one looks around the world at the political situation, sometimes we can't really understand other nations. There are still great differences between different peoples of the world. How could we ever truly expect to understand the motivations and actions of an extraterrestrial civilization? So many people ask, what do visiting extraterrestrials want? What is their relationship with governments? Could they be pressuring governments to disclose more information? The truth of the matter is that we simply don't know, and there's nothing to be ashamed of about that. I am very suspicious when anyone on any subject pretends that they have all the answers. I very often pay more attention to people who are honest enough and truthful enough to say, I don't know. And really, when it comes to extraterrestrials, are they visiting? Why are they here? What is the agenda? The only truthful answer that we have is we don't know. We can't put ourselves into their mind's eye. They might be coming here to invade. They might be coming here as scientists or explorers. They might be coming here as anthropologists to study newly emerging civilizations in the universe. They might be coming here as tourists. We just don't know. And that's what makes the question interesting and actually fun. Some people believe that there have been UFO crashes and that technologies from UFOs have already been incorporated into our society. Some people think that, for example, things like stealth technology or the transistor or night vision goggles, lasers, that this is all extraterrestrial technology that we have acquired, and we have either been given it as gifts or we figured it out for ourselves by having reverse engineered it. I don't know whether that's true. I'm a little skeptical because I think that unless the technology gap was very, very narrow, I'm not sure that we would ever understand it. So, for example, we all nowadays carry smartphones with us. And if your smartphone, maybe an iPhone 16 or whatever people have, if that was sent back in time 10 years, maybe Apple would be able to figure it out and make it. But if you sent it back 50 years in time, I think it's much more difficult. And if you sent it back 10,000 years in time, our Stone Age ancestors would look at this smartphone and they would just think that it was a magic, flat, shiny rock. And they wouldn't understand what it was, let alone be able to make them themselves. So even if elements in the US government or elsewhere around the world had acquired extraterrestrial technology, unless it was very, very close to us, I'm not sure we would be able to do anything with it. I talked about the possibility of civilizations existing elsewhere in the universe 1 billion years ahead of us. To us, their technology would be indistinguishable from magic, and I don't think we could replicate that. So I don't know whether these companies like Apple or Tesla or SpaceX or whoever it is, I don't know that they have this technology, but even if they did, I don't think they could necessarily use it. I think there are questions about why the United States government has been hiding information on this subject, has not been as open as we might have liked. And I think one of the reasons for this is just human nature, embarrassment. No government likes to admit that there might be things flying in its airspace that they can't identify. particularly when the data shows that these objects are very often faster, more maneuverable, and capable of greater accelerations than the best military aircraft, missiles, and drones that we have. Governments exist, governments survive by projecting power and authority. And so you never want to admit or even imply that suddenly you might be in second place. And that's, in a way, the lesson that the UFO phenomenon teaches us, because these things are orders of magnitude faster and more maneuverable than anything we have. And that's not a situation that governments, particularly the United States government, is comfortable with. There is a very interesting question about why UFOs seem to appear very often over nuclear facilities, whether that's nuclear power stations, nuclear missile complexes, or even over the oceans in areas where nuclear submarines are operating. Now, there are two theories about this. The first theory is that the UFOs are somehow interested in our nuclear weapons. If we're dealing with extraterrestrial visitation, for example, one theory is that these are morally very advanced beings that take a very negative view of our attachment to nuclear weapons, and they think we should get rid of them. They see with absolute horror that, of course, we've used them in anger against cities, not just military targets, but cities where many civilians were killed. And so one theory is that they're interested and concerned about this. They maybe want to stop us. Maybe they want to teach us. But there's another theory, and this is a more skeptical idea, that this is just a statistical anomaly and that these nuclear facilities are not necessarily hotspots for UFO activity, but that because these nuclear locations are more heavily surveilled, I mean, we have more cameras there, we have more surveillance, patrols. Maybe the theory is that if there's something strange in the skies, we are more likely to detect it. So we still don't know the answer to that question, but that is a question that the United States Congress has asked, and they've asked the Pentagon, so the US Department of Defense, they've asked them to go and find out the answer to that question. So this will be very, very interesting to see how this unfolds over the next year or two. The universe, so far as we know, is nearly 14 billion years old. Planet Earth and the solar system was only formed just a little over 4 billion years ago. So it is perfectly possible that in this ancient universe, there might be other civilizations that arose billions of years before humanity. And I often ask myself, what would these advanced civilizations that had so much more time to learn, what would they look like? What might they have discovered about the universe and maybe about themselves? And I don't know whether we would necessarily use words like spirituality or whether we would use more secular words, but I think it's one very good assumption we can make that if there are civilizations out there with a billion-year head start on us or more, then they would have advanced to a greater level than we are at currently. And now, whether one calls that spirituality or enhanced consciousness or just being more clever or just having more time to have amassed more knowledge. However we describe that, I think those civilizations would have had the opportunity to get ahead of where we are now. And that interests me because I want to meet civilizations like that, and I want to hear what they have to say and hopefully learn from it. Some people, of course, believe that extraterrestrials are already here, that they have visited us since the dawn of time, and that they have never really gone away. And some people talk about them as being the watchers. And some people go further and say not only have they watched, but they have influenced human development. Um, we have come from a Stone Age society to a society that has now developed stealth fighters and space probes. And we've done that in a few thousand years. So many believe that they are already here and among us. And maybe that's true. Maybe we will never know. But it is an interesting possibility for sure. When we have open contact with extraterrestrials, that we will be led into a new world. That, for example, I have heard people talk about the possibility of there existing a sort of galactic federation, like you see in TV shows and movies like Star Trek. It stands to reason, I think, that societies, different civilizations in the universe would come together in a common forum to share information and to maybe make some basic laws and to try and prevent conflicts. And that raises the very interesting question about what would happen to planet Earth in this new environment. I think we really can't predict it. I think, as I have speculated, it is a very good assumption that every aspect of our lives, both as individuals, but also as societies, as nations, and as humanity as a whole, would fundamentally change. But quite what that would look like, I don't think we know. And I think that's what makes this really interesting. Not only do we not have the words for this, but maybe at our current level of development, we don't even have the capacity to understand what it would look like. It would be like trying to explain quantum physics to chimpanzees, only this time we're the chimpanzees. But what I think I could speculate, and I think this is interesting, is it would be like a child and their first day in kindergarten, their first day in nursery school. We would not know what to expect. We would be a little bit apprehensive. And we would know that this is the day that our lives are going to change forever, hopefully for the better. Hopefully it's the beginning of a lifelong experience of learning, not just as individuals, but as humanity, as we take our place for the first time on a wider stage. There may be some misunderstandings along the way. Not every child enjoys their first day at school. Sometimes lessons can be painful, but that doesn't mean that those lessons aren't important. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for watching and listening to this. I hope that you have found it interesting, and I hope that what I've discussed today will cause you to think about these issues, and I hope it will generate a lot of interest, discussion, and debate. You don't have to agree with everything I've said, and sometimes the interesting things come when we don't agree. But I thank you very much for watching and listening, and I'd like to wish you all goodbye and thank you.